Mark had always been close to his family. They were the kind of family that celebrated every holiday together, never missed a birthday, and believed in strong traditions. So when Mark decided to propose to his girlfriend, Zendaya, he knew it was a big step, not just for him, but for his entire family. On a warm, clear evening, Mark took Zendaya to their favorite spot in the park. It was a quiet place by a lake where they often sat and talked about their dreams for the future. That night, the moon was full, casting a soft glow on the water, making everything feel almost magical. As they walked hand in hand, Mark's heart raced. He had the ring in his pocket, and every step he took brought him closer to the moment that would change their lives forever. Finally, he stopped by the edge of the lake, turned to Zendaya, and dropped to one knee. "Zendaya," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were someone special. You've brought so much joy and love into my life, and I can't imagine spending another day without you by my side. Will you marry me?" Zendaya's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at Mark. She had known this moment might come, but nothing could have prepared her for the wave of emotions she felt. With a smile that lit up her face, she nodded, whispering, "Yes, Mark, I will marry you." Mark slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced, both filled with overwhelming happiness. It felt like everything was falling into place, like the world had finally aligned for them. They stood there for a while, wrapped in each other's arms, savoring the moment. As they walked back to the car, still holding hands, they couldn't stop smiling. They were already thinking about how to share the news with their families. Mark imagined his parents' reactions, how his mother would probably cry tears of joy, and how his father would give him a proud pat on the back. Zendaya, too, thought about telling her family and how they would be thrilled for her. In their minds, the future was bright and full of promise. They began talking about wedding plans, where they might live, and how they wanted to build a life together. Everything seemed perfect, and for that night they allowed themselves to dream without any doubts or fears. But as much as they wanted to believe that their love would conquer all, they were unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. They didn't know that their love would soon be tested in ways they hadn't imagined, and that the path to happiness wouldn't be as smooth as they hoped. For now, though, Mark and Zendaya were content. They were in love, they were engaged, and they were ready to face the world together. The future, with all its uncertainties, could wait. Tonight was about them, and the promise of a life filled with love and happiness. A few days after the proposal, Mark decided it was time for Zendaya to meet his family. He was excited, believing that his parents would love Zendaya just as much as he did. He had always talked about how close his family was, and he was sure they would welcome her with open arms. Zendaya, on the other hand, felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had heard so much about Mark's family, and she wanted to make a good impression. Although she was a little anxious, she trusted that love and kindness would bridge any differences between them. The day finally arrived, and Mark drove Zendaya to his parents' house. The house was large and beautiful, with a well-kept garden in front. As they walked up to the door, Mark squeezed Zendaya's hand reassuringly. "Don't worry," he said with a smile. "They're going to love you." When they walked inside, they were greeted by Mark's father, Robert, who was warm and friendly. He shook Zendaya's hand and welcomed her with a big smile, making her feel at ease. But when Mark's mother, Evelyn, came into the room and saw Zendaya, her smile froze, and a look of shock crossed her face. Evelyn had always imagined that Mark would bring home someone who looked like the girls from their neighborhood, someone who fit in with their family's traditions and expectations. She had never expected that Mark would fall in love with a black woman. The moment she saw Zendaya, all of her preconceived ideas and biases bubbled to the surface. Evelyn managed to hide her surprise behind a forced smile, but her eyes betrayed her true feelings. "Hello," she said stiffly, not even trying to mask the coldness in her tone. "It's nice to meet you." Zendaya noticed the change in Evelyn's demeanor immediately. The warm welcome she had hoped for quickly turned into an uncomfortable silence. She felt the chill run down her spine as Evelyn's cold gaze seemed to size her up, judging her before she even had a chance to speak. Despite the awkwardness, Zendaya tried to stay positive. She smiled politely and thanked Evelyn for having her over. But as the evening went on, it became clear that Evelyn wasn't interested in getting to know Zendaya. She barely spoke to her, and when she did, her questions were short and distant, as if she was just going through the motions. Mark, sensing that something was wrong, tried to keep the conversation going, talking about his job and asking his parents about theirs. Robert was kind and did his best to make Zendaya feel comfortable, but Evelyn's coldness hung over the evening like a dark cloud. As the night dragged on, Zendaya felt more and more out of place. She could tell that Evelyn wasn't happy with her, and it hurt more than she wanted to admit. She had come here hoping to find a second family, but instead she felt like she didn't belong. By the time the evening was over, Zendaya was ready to leave. As they said their goodbyes, Evelyn gave Zendaya a quick, dismissive hug that only confirmed what Zendaya had felt all night. She was not welcome. On the drive home, Mark noticed how quiet Zendaya was. He reached over and took her hands, squeezing it gently. "I'm so sorry, Zendaya," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I didn't expect that at all. I promise I'll talk to her. This isn't how it's supposed to be." Zendaya nodded, but the hurt lingered. She had wanted so badly to be accepted, but instead, she felt rejected because of something she couldn't change, her skin color. It wasn't fair, and it made her wonder if their love would be enough to overcome the challenges they were now facing. As they drove through the quiet streets, both of them were lost in their thoughts. Mark knew he had to do something to fix this, but he wasn't sure how. And Zendaya, for the first time, began to doubt whether their love could truly bridge the gap that had suddenly appeared between them and his family. After Zendaya left, the atmosphere in the house was thick with tension. Evelyn, Mark's mother, had tried to keep her emotions in check during dinner, but now that Zendaya was gone, she couldn't hold back any longer. She found Mark sitting alone in the living room, his mind clearly troubled. Evelyn walked in and stood in front of him, her arms crossed tightly. "Mark, we need to talk," she said, her voice firm. Mark looked up at his mother, already dreading the conversation. He had noticed her coldness towards Zendaya during dinner and knew this was coming, but he hadn't expected it to feel this heavy. "What's on your mind, Mom?" Mark asked, trying to sound calm, though his heart was racing. Evelyn took a deep breath, her expression serious. "I don't think Zendaya is right for you," she began, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "She's a sweet girl, but she's not a good fit for our family." Mark felt his stomach drop. He loved his mother, but he loved Zendaya too. Hearing his mother say these things cut deep. "Mom, Zendaya is the woman I want to marry. She's kind, smart, and she makes me happy. Isn't that what matters?" But Evelyn shook her head. "It's not that simple, Mark. Our family has certain expectations, certain traditions. Zendaya doesn't come from the same background as we do, and I'm worried about how that will affect your future. You need to think about what's best for you in the long run." Mark's chest tightened. He had always respected his mother's opinions, but this felt different. It felt wrong. "Are you saying you want me to break off the engagement?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn looked him in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "I'm saying that you need to think long and hard about this, Mark. If you stay with Zendaya, you're going to face a lot of challenges. I don't want you to go through that. You have a duty to this family, to our name. I'm asking you to reconsider." Mark felt torn apart. On one hand, he couldn't imagine his life without Zendaya. She was everything he had ever wanted in a partner. But on the other hand, he had always felt a deep sense of loyalty to his family. His mother's words weighed heavily on him, filling him with doubt and confusion. "Mom, I love Zendaya," Mark said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I don't want to lose her." Evelyn's expression softened slightly, but she didn't back down. "I know you care for her, Mark. Love isn't always enough. You need to think about your future, about our family's future. This isn't just about you. It's about all of us." Mark stared at the floor, his mind racing. How could he choose between the woman he loved and the family that had always been there for him? The pressure was overwhelming, and for the first time he felt truly lost. As Evelyn left the room, Mark was left alone with his thoughts, the weight of the decision he had to make pressing down on him like never before. He knew that no matter what he chose, someone was going to get hurt. And that realization tore him apart inside. Mark sat there for a long time, torn between his love for Zendaya and his loyalty to his family, wondering how he could possibly make the right choice. As the days passed, Mark found himself caught in a storm of conflicting emotions. His mother, Evelyn, didn't let up in her insistence that he end his engagement to Zendaya. Every time they spoke, she reminded him of the family's traditions, of the values they had always held dear. To Evelyn, family meant everything, and she couldn't understand why Mark would risk all that for a relationship she didn't approve of. "Mark, you have to think about what's best for the family," she would say, her voice laced with concern. "This isn't just about you. It's about our name, our reputation. Zendaya just doesn't fit into that picture, and deep down you know it." Mark would listen quietly, his heart heavy with guilt. He knew his mother's words came from a place of love, but they hurt all the same. Every time she spoke, it was like a dagger to his heart, driving him further into confusion. He loved Zendaya. There was no doubt about that, but the pressure from his family was overwhelming. They had always been close, and now, for the first time in his life, Mark felt like he was being forced to choose between them and the woman he loved. Evelyn wasn't the only one pressing him. His father, though less vocal, made it clear that he shared his wife's concerns. Mark's siblings, too, hinted at their discomfort, but they tried to be supportive in their own way. The once warm family gatherings became tense, with unspoken judgments hanging in the air. It was as if everyone was waiting for Mark to realize the mistake they believed he was making. Under this constant barrage, Mark began to question everything. His once clear conviction that he and Zendaya could overcome anything started to waver. The more his family pushed, the more he felt the weight of their expectations bearing down on him. He found himself distancing from Zendaya, not because he wanted to, but because he didn't know how to handle the situation. When Zendaya called, he would often let the phone ring a few times before picking up, steeling himself for the conversation. He knew she could sense the change in him, and it pained him to see the hurt in her eyes whenever they met. The easy, joyful moments they used to share were becoming rare, replaced by uncomfortable silences and awkward exchanges. Zendaya felt the shift too. She noticed how Mark hesitated before answering her questions, how he seemed distracted, as if his mind was elsewhere. She could feel a space growing between them, a space filled with doubt and fear. It broke her heart, but she didn't know how to reach him anymore. Every time she tried to talk about what was happening, Mark would brush it off, assuring her that everything was fine, even though they both knew it wasn't. The distance between them grew, fueled by Mark's internal struggle. He couldn't bear the thought of losing Zendaya, but the guilt of going against his family weighed on him more each day. He started avoiding her and making excuses to be alone, thinking that maybe, just maybe, the situation would resolve itself if he didn't have to face it head on. But deep down, Mark knew that wasn't possible. He was running out of time, and the decision he dreaded was looming closer every day. The more he tried to avoid it, the more it consumed him. And with each passing day, the strain on his relationship with Zendaya grew more intense, leaving them both questioning how much longer they could hold on. Zendaya had always been strong, but this situation was testing her limits. She loved Mark deeply, but the strain of this family's disapproval was becoming too much to bear. The once joyous future she had imagined with him now seemed filled with uncertainty and pain. She could see how much Mark was struggling, and it hurt her to watch him pull away from her bit by bit. But Zendaya knew she couldn't continue like this. She couldn't be with someone who wasn't fully committed to standing by her side no matter what. She had always believed that love was supposed to make you stronger, not weaker. And as much as it pained her to think about losing Mark, she knew she had to stand up for herself. One evening, after days of silence and avoidance from Mark, Zendaya decided it was time to confront him. She called him and asked if they could meet at their favorite spot in the park, a place where they had shared so many happy memories. Mark agreed, though his voice was hesitant, as if he knew what was coming. When they met, the tension was palpable. Zendaya looked into Mark's eyes, searching for the love and certainty that had once been so clear. But what she saw instead was a man torn between two worlds, unable to fully commit to either. Taking a deep breath, Zendaya spoke with a calm determination that surprised even herself. "Mark, I love you. I love you more than anything, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep fighting for us if you're not willing to fight with me. I need to know if you're truly with me, or if you're going to let your family's opinions decide our future." Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he listened to her. He knew she was right. He had been avoiding the inevitable, hoping that somehow things would just work out on their own. But hearing Zendaya speak so clearly, with such strength, forced him to confront the truth he had been running from. "I'm sorry, Zendaya," Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted to hurt you. I've been so torn between you and my family, and I didn't know how to handle it. But you deserve more than what I've been giving you. You deserve someone who can stand by you no matter what." Zendaya nodded, tears welling up in her eyes but refusing to fall. "I need to know, Mark. Are you that person? Can you stand by me, even if it means going against your family?" Mark's mind raced as he grappled with the weight of her words. He thought about the love they shared, the future they had planned together, and the life they could have. But he also thought about his family, their expectations, their traditions, and the bond he had always felt with them. The choice was tearing them apart, but he knew he couldn't put it off any longer. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice trembling with the gravity of the moment. "Zendaya, I love you. I love you more than anything. And I know now that if I don't choose you, I'll lose the best thing that's ever happened to me. My family will always be important to me, but I can't let them control my life. I choose you, Zendaya. I choose us." Zendaya's breath caught in her throat as she processed his words. She had been prepared for the worst, ready to walk away if Mark couldn't make the commitment she needed. But now, hearing them choose her, she felt a wave of relief and love wash over her. "Thank you, Mark," she whispered, her voice breaking. "That's all I needed to hear." Mark reached out, taking her hands in his, and for the first time in weeks, they both felt a sense of peace. It wouldn't be easy. There would still be challenges ahead, and they both knew that Mark's family wouldn't accept this decision lightly. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. As they sat together in the park, holding onto each other tightly, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. And that, more than anything, gave them the strength they needed to move forward. The tension had been building for weeks, and everyone at the family gathering could feel it. Mark and Zendaya attended, hoping to keep the peace, but there was an undercurrent of unease that neither could ignore. Evelyn, Mark's mother, had been especially cold towards Zendaya, and it was clear that her disapproval hadn't softened. As the family sat around the dinner table, conversation flowed uneasily. Evelyn watched Zendaya with a critical eye, barely concealing her disdain. Zendaya, feeling the weight of her gaze, tried to remain calm, focusing on Mark for reassurance. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. Then, as the conversation turned to more personal topics, Evelyn made a cutting remark. "I just hope, Mark, that you realize the kind of future you're setting yourself up for. Some people just don't fit into our family, no matter how hard they try." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Zendaya's heart sank, and she felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to Mark, waiting to see how he would respond. Mark's jaw clenched as he tried to control his anger. He had tolerated his mother's disapproval long enough, but this was too much. The love of his life was being disrespected in front of the entire family, and he could no longer stay silent. "Enough, Mom," Mark said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've had enough of this." Evelyn looked at him, surprised by his tone. "What are you talking about, Mark? I'm just speaking the truth." "No, you're not," Mark replied, standing up from his chair. His heart was pounding, but he knew this had to be done. "You're being cruel, and I won't stand for it anymore. Zendaya is the woman I love, and she deserves respect. Not just from me, but from everyone in this family." A murmur of shock rippled through the room. No one had ever seen Mark speak to his mother like this. But Mark wasn't finished. He turned to face the entire family, his voice growing stronger with every word. "I love Zendaya, and I'm going to marry her. I don't care about the color of her skin, and I won't let anyone, not even my own family, make her feel like she doesn't belong. If you can't accept that, then I'm sorry, but that's your problem, not mine." Zendaya's eyes filled with tears as she listened to Mark defend her so fiercely. She had always hoped he would stand up for their love, but hearing him do it, seeing him face his family with such courage, made her love him even more. Evelyn's face hardened, her pride wounded by Mark's public defiance. "Is that how you feel, Mark? You would choose her over your own family?" Mark nodded, his decision firm. "Yes, Mom, I would. I love you, and I love this family, but I can't be part of it if it means giving up the woman I love. If you can't accept Zendaya, then I can't accept this family." The room was silent as everyone absorbed Mark's words. The rift that had been forming for weeks was now fully exposed, and there was no going back. Some family members exchanged uneasy glances, while others looked away, not knowing what to say. Evelyn, refusing to back down, stood up and left the room without another word. The tension in the room was palpable, but Mark felt a strange sense of relief. He had finally spoken his truth, and no matter what happened next, he knew he had done the right thing. Zendaya reached out and took Mark's hand, squeezing it tightly. She knew this wasn't the end of their challenges, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful. They had faced the worst of it, and they had done it together. As the evening wore on, Mark and Zendaya left the gathering early, knowing that things would never be the same with his family. But as they walked out into the cool night air, hand in hand, they knew they had each other. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. The fallout from the confrontation was severe. Mark's relationship with his mother was damaged, perhaps beyond repair. Other family members, influenced by Evelyn's views, also distanced themselves from him. But Mark had no regrets. He had chosen love over prejudice, and that decision, though painful, brought him closer to the future he truly wanted. And as Mark and Zendaya looked ahead, they knew that their journey wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face whatever challenges came their way, knowing that they had the strength to overcome anything as long as they stood together. Even after Mark's powerful stand against his family, Zendaya couldn't shake the lingering doubts that had taken root in her heart. She appreciated Mark's courage and the love he had shown her, but the hurt caused by his family's rejection still weighed heavily on her. Every time she thought about Evelyn's harsh words and the cold looks from the rest of the family, her heart ached. Zendaya started to question whether their love could truly withstand the deep-seated prejudices that had been revealed. She knew Mark loved her, but she also knew that love alone might not be enough to overcome the obstacles they faced. Would she always be seen as an outsider by his family? Would their future together be tainted by the pain of their disapproval? These thoughts kept Zendaya awake at night, her mind racing with questions she didn't have the answers to. She couldn't help but wonder if Mark regretted choosing her over his family, even though he had never said so. The uncertainty gnawed at her, making her feel as if she were standing on shaky ground. Mark noticed the change in Zendaya. She had become quieter, more withdrawn, and he knew that the events at the family gathering were still haunting her. He tried to reassure her, telling her how much he loved her and that they could get through anything together. But Zendaya's doubts weren't something that could be easily brushed aside with comforting words. One evening, as they sat together on the couch in Zendaya's apartment, the weight of their unspoken fears finally became too much to bear. Zendaya turned to Mark, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "Mark, I don't know if I can do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I love you so much, but I'm not sure if I can live with the knowledge that your family will always see me as someone who doesn't belong. I don't want to be the reason you lose them." Mark's heart broke at her words. He reached out and gently took her hand in his, trying to find the right words to say. "Zendaya, you're not the reason I'm losing my family. They're making that choice themselves because they can't see past their own prejudice. I chose you because I love you, and I want to build a life with you, no matter what." Zendaya shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "What kind of life can we have if your family is against us? I don't want you to regret choosing me. I don't want you to look back one day and wish you had done things differently." Mark felt a surge of emotion as he pulled Zendaya into his arms, holding her close. "I could never regret choosing you," he whispered into her hair. "You are everything to me, Zendaya. But I know this isn't easy, and I know you're hurting. If you need time to figure things out, I'll give it to you. But please don't doubt how much I love you." Zendaya clung to Mark, torn between her love for him and the pain of everything that had happened. She knew that Mark's love was real, but the fear of future challenges weighed heavily on her heart. Could she really build a future with him, knowing that his family might never accept her? And more importantly, could she live with the possibility that Mark might one day resent her for the rift between him and his family? These questions swirled in Zendaya's mind, leaving her feeling lost and uncertain. She knew she needed to make a decision, but she didn't know what the right choice was. She loved Mark deeply, but was love enough to overcome the prejudice and pain they had already faced, and the pain that might still come? As Zendaya wrestled with these doubts, Mark held her tightly, silently praying that their love would be strong enough to withstand whatever came their way. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for certain. He didn't want to lose Zendaya, and whatever it took, he was willing to fight for their future together. But in that moment, as they sat together in the quiet of Zendaya's apartment, neither of them knew what the future would hold. They only knew that their love was being tested in ways they had never imagined, and that the outcome would shape the rest of their lives. As the days passed, tensions within Mark's family continued to simmer, with Evelyn still holding onto her disapproval of Mark and Zendaya's relationship. It seemed that nothing could bridge the growing divide between Mark's love for Zendaya and his family's deep-seated prejudices. But then something unexpected happened. Mark's grandmother, who had remained mostly silent throughout the family's turmoil, decided that it was time to speak up. She had watched the family struggle, and she knew that if she didn't step forward, they might lose something precious. So one evening, when the family gathered for dinner, she quietly asked for everyone's attention. "Evelyn, Mark, everyone," she began, her voice gentle but firm. "I've been listening to all that's been said, and I think it's time I shared something with you, a story that I've kept to myself for many years." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the grandmother. Evelyn, in particular, looked at her mother with curiosity, not expecting what was about to come. "You all know me as a woman who has always valued family above all else," the grandmother continued. "But there's a part of my past that I've never spoken about, a part that, until now, I've kept hidden because of the pain it caused me." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "When I was a young woman, before I met your grandfather, I fell in love with someone. He was kind, gentle, and he loved me dearly. His name was Samuel, and he was a black man." A gasp of surprise rippled through the room. Evelyn's eyes widened in shock, and Mark sat up straighter, listening intently. We wanted to be together to build a life and a family, the grandmother said, her voice tinged with sadness. But when my family found out, they were horrified. They told me I had to end it, that I couldn't be with someone who wasn't one of us. They said it would bring shame to the family, that it was something that couldn't be accepted. The room was still, the weight of her words sinking in. I loved Samuel, and I didn't care about the color of his skin, the grandmother continued. But I was young, and I was scared. I let my family's prejudice come between us. I ended things with him, even though it broke my heart, and I've regretted it every day since. Tears welled up in the grandmother's eyes as she looked at Mark and then at Evelyn. When I see you now, Mark, standing up for the woman you love, I see the courage that I didn't have. And Evelyn, my dear, I see the same fear in you that my family had back then, the fear of something different, something unfamiliar. But I'm here to tell you that love is love, no matter what form it takes. Evelyn was speechless, tears brimming in her own eyes. She had always seen her mother as a pillar of strength and tradition, never imagining that she had carried such a secret all these years. The pain of losing Samuel never left me, the grandmother said softly, and I don't want to see that same pain repeated in this family. Mark and Zendaya deserve to be happy, just like I wanted to be happy with Samuel. We can't let the past keep us from embracing the future. Evelyn looked down, struggling with her emotions. The story her mother had just shared struck a chord deep within her. She had never known about this chapter of her mother's life, and it made her rethink everything she had been holding on to so tightly. Could she really allow her own prejudice to destroy her son's happiness? I didn't know, Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know you went through that. The grandmother reached out and took Evelyn's hand, squeezing it gently. It's not too late to make things right, Evelyn. It's not too late to choose love over fear. The room was filled with a heavy silence as everyone processed what had just been revealed. Mark, feeling a surge of hope, looked at his mother, wondering if this would be the moment that changed everything. Finally, Evelyn looked up, meeting Mark's gaze. I've been wrong, she admitted, her voice choked with emotion. I've been so focused on what I thought was right, what I thought was best for this family, that I didn't see how much I was hurting you and Zendaya. Mark's heart swelled with emotion as his mother's words began to heal the wounds that had been inflicted. I'm sorry, Evelyn continued, her eyes filling with tears. I don't want to lose you, Mark, and I don't want to be the reason you can't be with the woman you love. With those words, the tension in the room began to lift. The grandmother's story had opened a door, allowing the family to finally address the prejudice that had threatened to tear them apart. It was a small step, but it was the beginning of a new understanding, one that would help bridge the gap between them. As Mark reached out to embrace his mother, he knew that there was still work to be done, but for the first time he felt that they were on the right path. And he silently thanked his grandmother for her courage in sharing her story, a story that had the power to change everything. With the grandmother's story still fresh in everyone's mind, Mark and Zendaya knew that they had to take things slowly. The wounds that had been opened couldn't be healed overnight, but they were determined to work through them together. The experience had tested their love, but it had also shown them how strong they truly were. Mark and Zendaya began to spend more time with his family, finding small ways to rebuild the trust that had been shaken. At first, there were awkward moments and strained conversations, but gradually, things started to improve. Mark's mother, Evelyn especially, was making an effort to get to know Zendaya, though it was clear she still had her own struggles to overcome. She asked about Zendaya's interests, her work, and her family, trying to connect with the woman her son loved. Zendaya, on her part, showed grace and patience, understanding that it would take time for everyone to fully accept her. She shared her own stories, opening up about her dreams and experiences, and slowly, the family began to see her not just as someone different, but as someone who genuinely cared for Mark and brought out the best in him. As the weeks turned into months, the tension that had once gripped the family began to ease. There were still moments of difficulty, but they were fewer and farther between. The family dinners that had once been uncomfortable became opportunities to laugh and bond. Mark's siblings, who had initially been unsure how to act, now welcomed Zendaya warmly, appreciating the happiness she brought to their brother's life. Evelyn, though still guarded at times, found herself softening. She saw how happy Mark was with Zendaya and couldn't deny the positive influence she had on him. The stories Zendaya shared about her upbringing, her struggles, and her triumphs began to resonate with Evelyn in ways she hadn't expected. She started to see Zendaya as more than just someone from a different background, but as a strong, resilient woman who had faced challenges with grace and determination. One evening, as Mark and Zendaya were leaving after dinner, Evelyn pulled Zendaya aside. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke from the heart. I want to apologize, she said, her voice filled with sincerity. I know I've been difficult, and I'm sorry for the way I treated you. You show more patience and kindness than I deserved. Tendaya was touched by the words. She knew how much it had taken for Evelyn to say them. Thank you, Evelyn, she replied gently. I know this hasn't been easy, but I'm really glad we're trying to make this work. The two women exchanged a smile, small but genuine, a sign that healing was truly beginning. As the family continued to grow closer, Mark and Zendaya moved forward with their wedding plans. This time, the preparations were filled with joy and excitement, not just for the couple, but for the family that was learning to embrace love over fear. The wedding day arrived, filled with all the beauty and hope they had dreamed of. Friends and family gathered, not just to celebrate a union, but to celebrate the journey that had brought them all together. When Mark and Zendaya exchanged vows, there was a deeper meaning behind each word. They had faced challenges that could have torn them apart, but instead they had emerged stronger, their love forged in the fires of adversity. As they looked into each other's eyes, they knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with love, respect, and a commitment to building a future together. As they were pronounced husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause, but it was the quiet, knowing looks shared between them and their family that truly marked the day's significance. The past, with all its difficulties, had led them to this moment, and they were ready to move forward, hand in hand, into a future filled with hope and understanding. And so Mark and Zendaya's love story, once filled with conflict and uncertainty, blossomed into a testament to the power of love to heal and unite, proving that when love is true and unwavering, it can overcome even the deepest divides. If you enjoyed this story and want to stay connected for more emotional and inspiring content, please consider subscribing to our channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Also, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your comments below and let us know where you're watching from. Your support means the world to us, and we look forward to sharing more stories with you.